Nothing negative is ever going to happen to your business for planning for an eventual exit, ever. You're going to be more profitable. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to have a better culture. Everything around your business is going to be better because you're planning for that eventual exit and being attractive to a buyer because you don't know when that's going to come.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Welcome back to the Better Than Rich show. I'm your host today, Mike Abramowitz, and I'm here with my fellow Jewish counterpart, another Witz, Bennett Lebowitz, another Witz. What's going on, brother? Welcome to the show.
It's all good, man. Appreciate you inviting me, and we got to stay strong, right? Power in
Well,
numbers.
well, this is going to be a fun conversation. I was just telling you before we clicked record, we had Patrick Ling on the show. He did a great job on helping listeners, guys in the trades, prepare their business for exits. And I know that's
Yep.
something that you also specialize in, is kind of helping these guys make sure that they are ready to have a successful exit and how to avoid some of those pitfalls. So why don't we start there? I like to kind of dive right in, give some context. How would you define a successful exit, and how do you define a failed exit? And what causes success and what causes failure for some of these guys that are trying to sell their business that they put their blood, sweat, and tears into for, sometimes 10, sometimes 40, 50 years, and then they either have what will define as a successful exit and will define as a not so successful exit.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that question, but
Good.
I would
Run with
say
it.
I would say at a 30,000 foot view, a successful exit would look very similar to what you would do in a house, right? When you sell your house, you're trying to maximize the value of it. You're trying to have some equity that you can pull out of it. And so with a business, it's kind of similar in the sense that you want to maximize the value that you built. But in order to do that, it's got to be attractive to a buyer. And so, unlike a house, it takes years and a lot of development to actually be able to sell successfully. But one of the biggest things that we find that truly makes a successful exit is not the sale itself, it's what happens after the sale. How prepared is the owner to walk away from their business and feel good about that transaction? 75%, I think, is the number that owners regret that decision to sell within 12 months. A lot of that has absolutely nothing to do with the finances. It has everything to do that they were unprepared for what their life was going to look like the day after they sold. So that's really, really important part of what we talk about. We're not the ones to necessarily help facilitate that, but we have people that we work with that can work with the owner to really understand what their exit's going to look like and what's going to happen afterwards. An unsuccessful exit is one that is a forced exit that you didn't prepare for. It came out of nowhere, whether through, the 5 Ds of death, disability, divorce, distress, and disagreement. 40 to 45% of all sales happen that way. And usually these are liquidation events. These are people who can't sell the business. There's not a buyer in the open market. And so they have to liquidate all assets. That to us is a very unsuccessful sale. And we want to make sure that owners can control their own destiny, exit exactly how they want to, and achieving all of their personal and financial goals.
So obviously, there's circumstances that are outside of our control. There's things that we cannot necessarily prepare for. The D's: death, divorce, debt, disaster, right? There's a lot of these D's that show up. So we
Yep.
want to try to mitigate the risk as much as possible. How might someone be able to mitigate the risk of those D's that are showing up inside of their business or inside their life so their business is not extremely affected by that?
Yeah. Well, this resonates to me quite a bit, and it's actually why I got into the business. My father was a successful business owner when I was a kid, had 5 to 7 different businesses. My parents got divorced when I was about 7, and one by one, those businesses got shut down. The reason was there was no plan B, there was no contingency plan, there was no ideal exit space. It was forced upon him, and so his businesses basically shut down, and he got what he could get out of them. And so that really resonated with me as a young kid. And as I grew up and kind of watched our legacy business, which is an 80-year-old company that we just liquidated this year, and we got back into that kind of world, it was really understanding how you plan for the eventual exit that's going to take place, but also some of the external factors that play into that most business owners are not paying attention to because they're running a business. They're busy. They got 1,000 things getting thrown at them every day. and they're kind of in a firefighter situation. They just keep putting fires out every single day. And so they can't ever really work on the business and prepare the business to sell. And so what we want to be able to do is look at what an ideal exit would be for an owner and understanding that this exit could happen at any point. If you're a successful business, there's either brokers or PEs or somebody's reaching out to you to see if you're willing to sell the business. So I don't think it's unknown that owners are interested in knowing what their business is worth and whether or not they can sell it. The problem is once they go to the open market and they go through that due diligence process, that's where a buyer really starts to kind of pick apart the business. And whether or not they're going to buy that company is how well prepared they are to sell it, but also how well prepared that business is to fit into their existing portco. So there's a lot of moving parts to that, but once again, I think it's preparation. It's just controlling your own destiny, doing the things that you can control, controlling the controllables, and everything else is going to be what it's going to be. But at least you have a contingency plan.
All right, let's go in. We like to stay at the 10,000 foot great. I want to go into the tactical. So what are
Sure.
those things that the business could and should control? Like things we've talked about on the show before. We've talked about, CRM and having a setup, having some sort of predictable top of funnel, but we also need to mitigate and lower client acquisition costs. So we need to have something on the lifetime value of a client, maximizing that. We also have talked on the show about having a website that's optimized, that functions, having some sort of, predictable client journey, some sort of talent journey. We don't, most people don't want to buy a job, so they want to have like stops and playbooks and documentation in place. So we've kind of tackled all of these on the show at some point in time. I would love for you to just riff on what are the controllables? Like what are the
Yep.
items that the listener can say, all right, check. I'm doing a good job on these. I got these things done. And then it's like, ooh, I have an opportunity on some of these. What were some things that might show up for you when you hear that?
Yeah, so we'll kind of break it down into different areas of the business. So financial, clean books, right? Reconciled, they're clean, the reporting is accurate. Aging AR reports are kept up with. You don't have anything that's outside probably 30 to 60 days, depending on your terms. You have forecasting models, you have budgeting models, you understand what your CapEx expenditures are going to be each year. These are things that are really important because a buyer is going to come in and they're going to want to know, one, that's how you value the company, but also they're going to want to know that it's accurate in terms of looking at the profitability and the value that you're asking for. Now, moving over into operations, that's where things get kind of tricky because there's not a quantifiable metric like you have in finances, right? And so, to your point, SOPs, looking at your culture and your identity statements and looking at your hiring practices and your HR, how you're dealing with sales and marketing, all of these things are going to be really, really important in terms of a buyer coming in and looking at it because once again, think of selling a house, a buyer's going to come in and they're going to run that, whatever 1,000 point inspection, right? And it's going to take 8 hours to go through it. Well, due diligence is similar, but it takes months to go through. And so a buyer is going through every single aspect of your company, legal, operational, sales and marketing, finance. A big one now is tech stack, looking at how you're gathering data, how you're using that data and leveraging it, and whether or not it's good data, right? A lot of companies are gathering a ton of data points, but they don't really know which ones to track and how to track it and how to actually validate it. And so buyers are starting to come in, at least sophisticated buyers are starting to come in and really paying attention to that because that data really plays into their ROI.
Okay. So if I wanted to have something tactical, tangible that I could do to audit my current business right now, I'm not looking to exit right now, but I want to just
Right.
take this first steps towards positioning myself to have the option to exit and get the highest amount of money for that exit. Is there a pathway? Is there a journey? Is there a first step here? Then take this step, the next one reveals itself. Do you have anything like that? And if not, we can pitch back and forth and come up with that together so the listener can say, okay, these are the steps I want to take to go from where I am kind of towards a successful exit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do not start any kind of implementation until we've assessed the company. So we go through a quality of earnings, quality of operations pressure test. And it's our due diligence checklist. We're going through and we're looking at everything in the business to really understand where the biggest gaps exist. There's always some, consistent ones that are really throughout all companies, whether regardless of industry, that we find really the financials are a big one, right? They're not really reconciled. They're not paying attention to the AR. So those are some kind of low-hanging fruit opportunities that if you're really just wanting to kind of be tactical and look at some things in your business without a full assessment, is going back and looking at your books, making sure you have a strong accounting practice, that you're not just trying to drive profit down to save on taxes. Taxes are a byproduct of profit. Profit is a direct correlation to value. So if you drive the profit down, you're hurting yourself on the profitability side and the EBITDA side when you go to market. And so these are some really easy things. The other thing is SOPs. Do you have your SOPs documented? When was the last time you looked at your SOPs, reevaluating whether or not those are still consistent with your operations? Hiring practices, those are a really big one. Are you doing performance evaluations? How is your crew generating revenue? So we track revenue per employee. We have, in the industry, HVAC industry nationwide, it's about $235,000 of revenue per employee. Some of our greatest clients are generating 350, 370, depending on residential or commercial. And so these are really important metrics that you're looking at. If you aren't forecasting and putting a budget together for, next year, especially right now, I think you're missing a huge opportunity.
Ooh, I like this game. Metrics. So you just said approximately, if I heard you right, $300,000 approximately per employee, $300,000 in revenue per employee. I know you said there's a range there. Speak to that. How do you come up to
Yep.
that number? And then I'd like to know what are some other metrics that could be fun? Like I know someone on the show said under 10% client acquisition cost is where we want to kind of like stay in as an example. Like, any of those metrics, I would love to hear as many of those that or that you look at or what considers healthy.
Yep.
Yeah, and how you come up with some of those numbers if you know. I don't, if you don't, then no big deal.
No, absolutely. I mean, we want to be as pointed to this, and it changes every year, and it changes from area to area of the country, right? If you're comparing Memphis, Tennessee, where I'm from, to San Diego, California, or New York City, it's going to be different, right? So we try to track it at a nationwide level through IBIS World Reports. They have every industry report. They're updated quarterly, so you're getting the latest information. And so they have some real easy metrics that we can kind of go off of: revenue per employee, gross profit margins, net profit margins, things along those lines. But, the things that we talk to our clients about is really making sure that we're measuring things that matter. If we're just measuring metrics for the sake of measuring metrics and they're not driving anything in your business, then it's pointless. You can kind of almost get analysis paralysis, right? Where you're just overanalyzing everything in your company and nothing is actually getting implemented because you're so inundated with all the data points. So what we want to do is look at 3 to 5 metrics that we're really driving. Revenue per employee is a big one because it's easy to track, and it's also easy to put on a specific tech that you can say, hey, Bob, you're not generating what Joe is. Why is that? And we can kind of go in and look at those metrics. But also just really understanding, like recurring revenue is a big one in service contracts. If you can get your recurring revenue to as close to 50% of your overall revenue metrics, you earn 2 to 3x on those dollars versus one-off revenue. Now, the one-off revenue is bigger, right? You're getting these big construction contracts or whatever it may be, but the service contracts what lead into those big construction contracts. And so if you can drive that recurring revenue, a buyer loves that because he knows on day one what the business is going to generate, at least at a low ball kind of level. So these are some kind of things that we look at from an operational standpoint. It's hiring practices, it's looking at your sales funnel, making sure we're understanding what that true client acquisition cost is, the churn rate, how long are people staying on? Are these clients that are with you for years, or are they just kind of a one-off, right? And really tracking that, because if they're one-off, it's hard to value that because they may come back on every 3 to 5 years. Something happens and then they come back on. But once they fix that piece of equipment, you're probably not going to hear from them unless they have a service contract.
So what I heard, 50% of the
Recurring revenue.
recurring revenue
Yep.
should be, so 50% of the annual revenue should be recurring revenue is a healthy business.
If you can get it to that point, you can earn a higher multiple on that number
That's
than if it's non-recurring revenue.
awesome. So that's one. So now we
Yeah.
got what I heard is two. So we got $300,000. So revenue per employee, which would be $300,000 would be a good target per employee, depending on where you live, and then 50% of the annual revenue being recurring revenue through service agreements would be another metrics to know it's a healthy business, something to shoot for. Any others? I might have missed them. I know you're just like some of these numbers to like look at. I know you mentioned customer client acquisition cost. We kind of do you agree with that like 10% range or
Yeah. It depends on the industry and what you're doing. Once again, if you're looking at construction where it's a lot of one-off kind of jobs, you're going to have a higher acquisition cost than somebody who's service contract.
sure?
So it depends on that. And that's where we use IBIS World Report because we really want to
And what is it that
drill
you're saying?
down.
IDIS?
IBIS World.
IBIS.
And it's
Okay.
just these are industry benchmarking. So we go in and we look at either the NAICS code or SIC code. We plug them in and then we can run all the reports that we need to, both nationally as well as locally or as local as we can get. If you're in, the middle of Wyoming somewhere, there's not going to be a whole lot of data. But, if you can get into a larger city, we can even run some reports in that city. So we try to drill down as much as we can in really understanding that. But, if you're trying to drive value, Mike, it's really important to understand what buyers are looking for, right? So one of the biggest things that we can do is come in and evaluate your business from a buyer's perspective. A private equity firm is going to have a very different set of metrics that they go off of versus a strategic buyer. Strategic buyer, think, is your competition, right? They're coming in, they want to knock you out, they want to absorb your clientele or your techs or however, whatever the movement is, but they're coming in and really wanting to take over your business so they can grow their market space. So understanding who your ideal buyer is allows us to gonna go in and very specifically pull certain levers in your business that are going to drive value. Because if you're pulling the wrong levers, then you're going to miss the opportunity.
Do you find most of these guys are knowing who they want to sell to, or do most of these guys be like, I just want to get my business sold and I want to get top dollar. I don't care if it's my competitor or I don't care if it's private equity. I just want my business to be sold for the most amount of money. Do you think that that is a fair statement that most of these guys are thinking, or is it something maybe I'm missing here?
No, I think they do. I think the problem in the lower market is you have a lot of owner operators, right? And so it's hard to sell a business when you're driving the revenue. So you were asking what are some of the things that you can control to make your business sellable? That's probably the biggest one. Nobody wants to buy a business where the driver of all the revenue is going to leave as well, right? And so you have to systematically, that's why it takes time and that's why we want to work with our clients years before a sale is to identify these areas that need improvement because it's not an overnight process. What does it look like for you to pull yourself out of the day to day? 50%, my business would go under. Okay, why? Right? Because if your business is going to go under because you're not there, then a buyer's just going to skip over. There's plenty of businesses that are looking to sell. They're looking for the best opportunities that are going to drive their objectives. And so we want to make you kind of the low hanging fruit, the shiny object in a buyer's market.
Yeah. I think this is really important because a lot of the guys that are listening to the show, we're mainly working in the, I'll call it $3 to $5 million range. So they're not looking to exit right now. However, they reached my dad's age. My dad was just visiting. We're recording this on National Charlie Kirk Day, Remembrance Day, October 14th. He just flew back home yesterday, back to New Jersey, and he was getting, I don't know, probably 8 to 12 calls during working hours while he was here, visiting. He's 84 years old, and maybe another 6 to 8 calls outside of normal working hours. So it was kind of annoying because he was here for, Saturday,
Yeah.
Sunday, Monday, and he probably had, you know, several dozen phone rings each day on a weekend, and he's supposed to be spending time with his, I say supposed to be, but my imposition of him, but with his grandkids and his son that he only sees maybe once every couple of years. So
Right.
this is a perfect example. I use him as an example because most people get to 84 and they don't want to be answering that many calls or missing that many phone calls
Nope.
because they're an owner operator and he's still under an illusion that his business is going to sell at one point in time. And I'm like, you're out of your mind because it's just it's not a
Yeah.
business. It still relies on him. So we want to get this owner operator out of the weeds. We want to get this owner operator out of answering the calls. And that's why what we do a lot better than Rich on the show, and even with businesses that we're working with, we want to make sure that they have a predictable machine that is being built that is not reliant on the owner. So my curiosity would be if you do have an owner operator and you know, Bennett, that that business is not going to sell because no one wants to buy a business that requires an owner operator. What is that 50% of the time? You said, let's get them out of the business at least 50% of the time. What is the process of doing that from your seat? How do you get that business owner to say, all right, I'm going to step out of the business 50% of my time. Here's how to do that. Here's the playbooks, or here's the places to start, or these are the questions to ask yourself. This is what you want to look at and consider. What would be your response to that?
So we had a commercial HVAC company we've been working with for a few years, and this was a big issue. They had bought one of the owners out, and the other two, one was in the field, one was sales. And so we were talking about indirect labor costs. And they were like, we don't want indirect labor costs. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, it's not producing any revenue, so it's just a hit. And I said, yes, but if you look at it from the long game, what we're trying to do is every tech that you bring on is generating another set of issues that has to be dealt with from an administrative standpoint. So you can't just grow the tech side and not grow the administrative side, the infrastructure of the company. Typically an owner is going to say, well, I can take that on, right? I'm going to save my costs and I'm going to take that on. But the problem is they're missing more vital opportunities to grow the business because most owners are the visionary. So they're leading where the company's going. They are not the implementers. They did not get in business to do payroll and to reconcile the books and to do customer service and answer the calls and all the things that you have to do, aging AR reports and all that stuff that you have to do. Those are very low cost but high impact areas of the business that you can hire somebody on. And now in the day and age of AI and automation, there's a lot of great resources that are coming into the business world that allow you to automate a lot of these things to take that off your plate, to draw down some of that indirect labor cost. But you have to look at what are you doing daily in the business that you can pass off. And I think the biggest thing is if you ask most business owners, they can't even really describe what their day looks like because it's just all over the place, like a ping pong ball. People are walking in and out of their office asking questions. The phones, it's chaos. It's just semi-controlled chaos. And so every day they have their list of things that they need to get done, but every day they go home and that list is actually grown because not only have they not gotten through that list, but more things have gotten added to it. And so you have to look at from a logic standpoint, where is your best use in the company as an owner? It's usually not in the day to day, the tactical side of things. It's the strategic side. Somebody's got to drive the vision of the company. So if we can shave an hour a day, that's 5 hours a week, right? That's 250 hours a year. If we can shave 2 hours a day and we systematically are going through this process, identifying tasks that the owner is doing on a day-to-day basis and finding a low-level person to be able to do that, that's slowly going to move that needle forward to that 50%. In the business that I was telling you about in Memphis, we were able to double the business in revenue in 3 years, but also increasing, the infrastructure by probably payroll cost was up about 200%. But now the revenue is growing. They're adding techs. They have the support system. They've added technology. They've built a company, right? They've blown through that $5 million revenue mark and have gone through the $10 million revenue mark now, just in 3 years. And it's nothing crazy that we've done. It's just moving the owners out of their day to day so that they can drive the vision of the business.
So I just want to make sure I clear my own thoughts on this. When you say the revenue per employee, is that including
Mhm.
office manager or is that only for technicians? Is that, so
Yeah.
what deems an employee? And also if I'm using contractors versus like actual employees, I just realized that I wanted to get clarification on that metrics of revenue per employee, just for my own reference, because that's going to trigger my next thought. Your
Sure.
response will help clarify my next curiosity.
So in IBIS world, the revenue per employee is for the total employee count. So technicians, admin, anybody who is getting paid through the company, that is revenue per employee. So, if you got 10 employees, you got $1 million revenue. Doesn't matter whether eight of them are revenue producing or not, it's $100,000 per employee,
Got
right?
it.
And so
And
that's how
that's
we look at it.
full-time employees.
It's just revenue and period,
No, it
period.
doesn't matter if it's
Full-time,
full-time, part-time,
full-time equivalent. So if you got,
full-time
two
equivalent.
part-times, it's going to equal one full-time equivalent.
Cool.
And then the other thing we do is we go in and we start actually looking at and breaking out revenue generating employees versus indirect labor and tracking that as well. So we're getting a truer metric of what
And
is
employ and
actually taking place.
owner's payroll is included in one of those employees, I assume.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. So with that being said, the owner is an employee. That's why I wanted to get clarification here. Essentially, the
Yes.
owner is an employee in this revenue per employee metrics that we just established. That means that owner is doing tasks of someone in the company. So what I just heard Bennett say is, let's find the tasks that somebody else can do. Right? Pretty
Yep.
simple. We got that broken down. Well, if we want to figure out what those tasks are, there's so many different audits. There's so many different ways for us to do it. I think the easiest one would probably be like going through the client journey, right? Like you have someone who has marketing, meaning someone who's never bought from you. And then it's like sales, someone I'm trying to get to buy from me. And then fulfillment, which is they bought from me. Now I got to do the work that I sold them. So it's like, let me get your attention so you can buy, and then I'll fulfill on whatever it is that you bought from me. If it's broken down into those simple like three buckets, then on the back end is like finance, right? Like
Right.
we
It's the
obviously
rear
there's
view
so many other
mirror.
departments, right? Operations, we could call it, right? So if we're staying in this camp before a sale, during a sale, after a sale to keep it really easy, and we audit what are all the tasks. So if we say, all right, the phone is ringing. Well, who's calling? Is it someone is on the fulfillment side, like we're doing a job for them currently? Someone on the sales side that we're trying to close them or court them, or we're in the sales process with them, or someone who's never met us in our entire life and they want to get into the sales pipeline, right? Like, well, who's answering those phone calls? And if we have those different buckets, could it be the same person that's answering those phone calls? Do we need to direct the lines to the different types of, different customer service representative? One phone line for doing fulfillment, they call this phone number and that goes to this person, or one phone number for marketing and that goes to this one number for. I'm not trying to overcomplicate. In fact, I'm trying to oversimplify it. But I think of a guy that's listening to this, they're like, this all sounds good in theory, but man, I really want to put something into practice. And I don't want to just go hire someone just to take over shit off my plate, because now I'm just spending more money that I could just do it myself. Bennett, you and I know the answers to this stuff. I'm just trying to
Right.
get into the guy's head if he's listening here.
Yeah.
So what do we say to this guy?
Well, it's the number one hurdle I have to get over when we're talking about this, right? Is like, okay, we're just going to increase payroll, and that's going to be a direct hit onto my profit, and I'm going to lose money on this. And yes, but you have to keep growing your business, right? Because if you're not growing, you're dying. That's an old kind of saying my dad always told me is like, if you're not constantly growing, you're dying. And so if you're growing, and the easiest way to grow is generating revenue, and you're bringing on these people, there's eventually going to be a crack in the foundation, right? Where you cannot keep up with capacity. And so all the things that you're known for in the community of, service and trust and loyalty and all these great things that people call you for because they can rely on you, those start to create cracks in the foundation that become bigger and bigger issues. And then all of a sudden the revenue starts going backwards. So the idea is not to just throw people at problems, but to understand what the problems are and who the best people are to be able to solve those problems. What ends up happening in a small business is as you're growing, you're just like, I need this. And so you hire somebody. They're not necessarily skilled for that, but they're hireable. And so you hire them and then you train them and you hope they're doing a good job. but really all you're doing is putting more and more tasks on that individual that they were never really ever skilled to do and take on in your business. And so what we're saying is don't just add people, identify the tasks that need to be done and who is the best person to be able to do that. If you have your salesperson dealing with all your customer service information, project management, all these things that go on in a business, who's driving sales at that point? Because if they're in the field making sure that the customer is taken care of, then they're not driving new opportunities and new sales. And so it's a cycle. It just keeps coming back to the same issue is eventually you have to hire somebody who is skilled at that specific task, and then you can build a department and a process around it. And then eventually what's going to happen is that cost, that payroll cost is going to be superfluous to any new revenue that's generated because you have support, you have infrastructure. It's the rebar in concrete, right? If we're going to use the analogy of construction, the taller the building, the more support you have. The more growth you have, the more support you need internally. It can't just be revenue generating. It has to be admin. Otherwise, you're going to hit a ceiling and you're going to stay there. That's why so many business owners struggle to get to the $1 million, struggle to get to 2.5 million, 5 million, 10 million. The ones that have gotten to 15 million and further understand that rule. Yes, you need admin and support to be able to drive growth. And it's just a byproduct of it.
It's great.
It's a mind shift from being tactical to strategic. And it depends on what you want to do. If you want to stay the one man shop and everything's easy, that's great. But just understand you're going to be turning business away because you can't take it on anymore. There's not enough growth there.
Yeah, and one of the things that we say is like you want to buy back your time. That's why I love the book by Dan Martell, is because you're paying someone to do the $20 an hour item tasks so you can do the $200 an item or $200 an hour task. So it's like
Yep.
you're 10xing the ROI on time back. So you cannot just like go make a sandwich. It's to do higher leveraged, higher
Right.
value activities, right? But sometimes we don't see it that way. It's like I could just do this. Yes. But every time we say yes to doing the thing over here, we're saying no to doing the thing over here. So we're saying yes to the distraction, yes to the reaction, but we're saying no to the revenue generating priority. Every time we say yes to, 15 minutes over here, 10 minutes over here, reaction, firefight, this and that, we're saying no to the top line revenue driving activity that we really need to focus on, which is usually in the strategy seat. So anything else you want to say on this before I take a pivot into a full different direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to understand the journey of a business and that most business owners did not get involved in a business or starting a business to run a business. They got involved because they had a skill or a trade around something and they felt like they could do it better than the places they were working at. The problem is that most of us didn't go to school for HR, didn't go to school for accounting, didn't go to school for legal. And so all we do is we just kind of do the best we can. We're just trying to keep it together. Once again, that chaos. And what your point was beautifully articulated was you are driving the growth. You're driving the high value impacts to your business. If you are spending hours on something that you are not skilled at doing, that somebody at 15 to $20 an hour could do to free you up, how much money are you going to be able to generate in that 5 or 10 hours a week that you just freed up? Could be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that could be generated that push your business forward that quite honestly, you're not even thinking about the payroll cost because you're growing so rapidly. It's you have to have it. It's the safety net. So I think it's a mind shift and you just got to decide where you're at. We're not here to dictate where you need to go. We're here to understand where you're trying to go and help you facilitate that.
Yeah, that's great. And that's why we've kind of shifted our focus just on our fulfillment. And that's why I love the partnership that really could live between what you're doing, Ben, and what we're doing is because these guys that are trying to get to that 5 million predictable, we kind of work with that infrastructure. Like, is the website optimized? Do you have a CRM that's set up? Are there automations for a lead magnet is, do they
Mhm.
even have a lead magnet of some sort? And is there a
Right.
follow-up sequence? Do they have a re-engagement campaign to their pass list? Is there a nurture sequence after the point of sale? How do we maximize the LTV? What's the sales process? Are they using a triple option close, right? Is there any discovery call that's happening as a pre-qualifier before we send a crew out to their homes? So we're trying to increase conversion while mitigating expenses of sending crews to
Hmm.
like non-qualified people. Just like all of that to optimize the user experience for the owner, but also the staff and also for clients. And once we get that done, that's usually a foundation for that $5 to $10 million company. But then once the foundation is laid, now it's a new set of challenges.
Right.
Documentation of the operations and the SOPs and talent and onboarding and hiring and training and finances. And that's where you kind of specialize. So it's almost like a really awesome baton pass of like us, all the people you turn away, you're like, hey, you guys are too small. You don't have your shit together. Go talk to these guys who are better than rich and then come back. And then we send them back to you to be like, all right, now that you got your shit figured out, you got a foundation set, let's elevate you guys to that 20, 30, 40, 50 million exit that we could position you for. So I really enjoy just like this platform that we have, this podcast, and just like this network that we're building of other really awesome experts inside the trades that are all serving the same guy. So to kind of take a pivot, I want to go in a different direction for just a moment. Looking forward to who you are serving and how you're serving them, like from this point and moving into helping them have these exits. Who is the ideal like client avatar that you're like, you know what, this is the person that if they're here in 18 months from today, I would love to help them go from where they are to a really great exit. Can you just like describe that person? And then
Sure.
also what you do with them to help them really equip for that successful exit. So that way, end my rant, the people that we're helping, as we want to maybe pass that baton to you. Hey, this is what we do to kind of help you go through from where you are to where you're going to go over like an 18-month period, as an example.
Yeah, so we went through all the ICP journeys of trying to figure out who that real ideal client looked like. And we were like, okay, let's start with 5 million, 10 million, whatever it was. And really what we came back with is it is a persona of a, call it avatar or whatever, of an owner that we work really well with. One, they're usually in the trades. Two, they are strategic minded. So they're not dealing with the day-to-day issues in the business anymore, or they don't want to. They want a path out of that. Three, they want to be transaction ready always, regardless of where they are today, because they know that that drives value and that the business is only going to be stronger if you're planning for an exit. Nothing negative is ever going to happen to your business for planning for an eventual exit ever. You're going to be more profitable. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to have a better culture. Everything around your business is going to be better because you're planning for that eventual exit and being attractive to a buyer because you don't know when that's going to come. And then the other one is, which really important to us is that you want to be able to give back to the community. If you were to sell, you want that legacy to endure in that community that you thrived in for decades, right? The employees still have a place to go work. The customers still have a place to come and get their services done. Vendors can rely on you to continue to do business. Some of that may change because a buyer's going to do what a buyer's going to do, but at least it's important to the owner that we can have that conversation and that legacy really endures. So, those are really the things that we're looking for. It doesn't sound that complicated, but to get all of them kind of running together, it takes a certain type of owner to be able to really do the things that we're asking them to do.
That's great. And if somebody wanted to take the next step in having that conversation with you and kind of supporting them, what might that look like?
Yeah. So we spend a lot of time on discovery probing, whatever word you want to use on that process. We don't just jump into the engagement. We really want to understand the business owner. We want to understand the family dynamics. We want to understand the timeline. We want to understand some of the bottlenecks within the organization that are going to cause us some problems as we go into implementation mode. And then we take all of that and then we assess, we pressure test the company, like I said, from a financial and operational standpoint to really identify those red flags. From there, we kind of give them a roadmap that says, here's exactly what we would do next. If you want to take this on by yourself, we're more than happy to hand that over and let you do it. If you want us to help you implement this stuff, and let our team come in and really do a lot of the heavy lifting, we can do that as well. We work off of about an 18 to 24 month timeline from the assessment because we it takes time. And so what we're saying is, one, we want to go through that entire due diligence process with you, understanding what that's going to look like from a buyer's perspective. But also, we want to be able to start shopping the market. Some of these things are not internal controllables, right? The economy, interest rates, inflation, like all the things that we've been going through over the last 3 or 4 years have really driven the M&A market into a tighter buying process. Buyers are not like in 2020 and 21 and 2 when money was free flowing in the economy, you were seeing ridiculous multiples out there because it was so cheap. But then interest rates started driving up and it became harder and harder to validate the multiples that some of these owners were wanting and still carrying some of that debt that they were going to have on their books. So we want to, once again, control everything we can internally when it's the right time for the buyer to be able to sell, both internally and externally. We want to make sure that we can line them up with a broker or an IB and get them into the marketplace.
And just to share my screen, I just want to make sure is this still the most up-to-date place to go where it says this readiness
Yes.
assessment right on your website?
Yes. So
So
that's that right there, the readiness assessment is just a very high level, call it 50,000 foot view of your business. And it'll give you an understanding of kind of what your opinion of value is in the market. And it'll get you a response. And then we can sit down and kind of go over that. If you want to go into a deeper assessment where we would actually come in and start implementing, that's going to be a much deeper dive into your business.
great. So, and they could just go to pandoconsultinggroup.com in order to get all this information. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, this is super helpful. Bennett, I really love what you're doing for these guys. I really love the potential synergy that's there as well. Is there anything that we did not hit on today? We didn't talk about. You're like, Mike, you know what? I kind of wanted to talk about that today. We didn't get a chance to talk about that. Is there anything that like that we didn't bring into this conversation that you were looking forward to talking through before we kind of start heading towards the exits?
Yeah, I mean, I think just real quickly, I mean, the reality of selling your business, 70 to 80% of companies that go to market do not sell. Now, ironically, every business owner I talk to never puts themselves in that 70 to 80% bucket. They always put themselves in the 20 to 30 that are going to sell. And so what you need to understand is that this is not an easy process. This is something that takes time and planning and diligence and money. I hate to say it, you're going to have to spend some money to be able to prepare your business. So, these are things that the multiples are so huge on the back end. When you apply a multiple for every dollar and it's 7, 8, 9, 10x for every dollar that you put into your business, the return on that is incredible. And so most business owners are not looking at it. They're looking at a dollar cost, not a dollar made or valued. And so that's what we really want to be able to kind of work with them on and just bringing the education and the attention around the realities of going to market.
It's great, man. Give me a quick rundown. What season of life are you in? Where you're located. Just humanize that part. I know
Yeah,
sometimes we
absolutely.
start with that, but a lot of times I end with it because sometimes people are tuning in the show. It's like, give me the value, teach me stuff, show me you're good, show me you're qualified, and then tell me about you. So that's why I like to
That's fair.
sometimes do that in this show. So give us a little
Yeah.
rundown, a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I have a partner in Seattle, Washington. We are nationwide from a business perspective. We have two daughters. I'm married to my wife, Mindy, for 15 years, two daughters, 12 and 21. And yeah, just loving life right now. It's a great kind of space where I'm at. I just turned 49 last week. And so last year of my 40s, I'm embracing it before I get into a new decade. And so it's a great time of life, I think, where we are right now in terms of a business model. I think it's very advantageous because everybody's trying to figure out, of course, with the boomers trying to sell, but our generation, Mike, is looking at the boomers going like, I don't want to work till I'm 85, right? And so it's this compression of timelines that's coming together that's creating a really great opportunity for everybody involved. So we're really excited about that. And then just from, where we are, I think in life as well is just it's a good time. It's a good space we're at right now. And so we're really fortunate and blessed and yeah, loving every day of it.
Well, I appreciate you giving us some of your time. I know you're traveling right now, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So making the time for us and this conversation, and we really appreciate that, Bennett. And we like to ask every guest the same question. What does it mean to you to be better than rich?
It's having a purposeful life, right? Everything we do is purpose driven. We don't know how many days we have on this earth. And so everything we do should be purpose driven. The money we can't take with us. It makes it a little bit more enjoyable while we're here. But if you're not creating purpose in your life and others' lives, then really what do you have?
It's great, man. And if people want to stay in touch with you, Bennett, I know we obviously already captured the website itself. Is that the best place to go? Or if somebody wants to stay in touch or connect with you, where would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well. We're kind of redoing our marketing as we speak right now. So hopefully we'll have a new site in Q1 that's going to be a little bit more engaging, and then the social media as well will follow with that.
Cool. Well, we'll put the link in the show notes, and listener, I would definitely, yeah, at a bare minimum, do the readiness assessment, see where you're at. And then, if it makes sense, with where you're at in your business, to take Bennett up on his offer of at least poking around the business and see where you're at. So again, pandoconsultinggroup.com. And Bennett Lebowitz, thank you so much for making the time. And listener, thank you for tuning into the show. If you're liking season 4, keep us updated. What you're liking, what you're taking away, what you're implementing into your business, what you want more of, what you want less of. We always appreciate your feedback. You can always send that over to mike@betterthanrich.com. Myself or Anna will source that for you and be able to get you any type of resources that you need. So as always, leave today better than you found it. We'll see you next time on the Better Than Rich Show. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at betterthan_rich and join our Facebook group at the Better Than Rich Show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, leave today better than you found it.